7 o'clock.
Hot
So
diggity
we'll
dog.
keep letting people in, but as they come. But welcome everyone to Meet the Author with Elizabeth Crowens. And I just want to mention a couple of things. I'm the Vice President, Karen Phillips of Capital Crimes. Our next meeting is on April 20th on Zoom with firearms expert Carl Henwood. He will talk about how to incorporate firearms into our writing. Also, a reminder, your Farm to Foul Play short stories are due by May 31st. And now, without further ado, I'll hand the baton over to our fabulous Penny Manson.
Well, I don't know how fabulous I am, but thank you, Karen, for handing the baton over to me. And I hope you're all hard at work on your short stories for the anthology. We really want this next anthology to be the best ever because each one is better than the one before. So this next one should be great. I've been doing all kinds of research about things people can eat that would kill them. It's making my husband very nervous. Very, very nervous. So, so he goes, how old are those eggs? I said, oh, I don't know. Anyway, okay. So we are really, really excited to be given the chance to meet Elizabeth Crowens, whose latest book, Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, was released on March 5th of this year. And the information on the novel reads Sherlock Holmes has lost his dog. We have bigger crimes to solve. Go find him yourself. That's what the Los Angeles Police Department told Basil Rathbone.Asta, the dog from the popular Thin Man series, has also vanished, and production for his next film is pending. MGM Studios offers a huge reward, and that's exactly what young private detectives Babs Norman and Guy Brandt need for their struggling business to survive. Celebrity dog napping is now a growing trend. Welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump right into this. Hollywood Hounds has the flavor of an author who is an animal person. Did you have dogs growing up?
I had a German Shepherd growing up. I
Okay.
don't have dogs now. I would love to, but I need to move back to California first and get a bigger place.
Dogs definitely need room to roam, even if you have little guys. We have Chihuahuas, but I can't imagine keeping them in an apartment.
Oh, no. In fact, when I first moved to New York, I immediately became a cat person. And even though I grew up with dogs, I just could not picture myself dealing with a dog in New York City.
Yeah. So, how, as a writer, okay, how do you approach your writing day? Are you a daytime or a nighttime writer?
This is bedtime right now for me. I am a middle of the night writer. I set my alarm for 4 a.m. and I usually write till about 7:30, 8 o'clock a.m. And then I'll take a nap for maybe 45 minutes and then I'll go on social media and then I'll take another nap at some point. Probably usually after lunch. I'll go down for about an hour and a half.
Boy, that's discipline. If I got up at 4, if I went back down for a nap, there'd be no getting back up. There would be no getting back up. And you have a wrong answers only on Facebook that you post. That's very, very popular.
I do. That's the evening post, and the morning post is the caption contest. Give me your best or your worst. And
Right.
yes, I have actually had people at conventions come up to me and say, "Oh, you're the caption contest person." So I have actually made friends before I physically met people because of that caption contest.
Social media really does help with that. It helps you have a whole array of people that you are friends with before you actually get the chance to meet them.
Yeah, no, it really does.
Okay, so for 30 years, you've worn many hats in the entertainment industry, contributed stories to Black Belt Blackgate, Sherlock Holmes Mystery Magazine, Hell's Heart, and the Bram Stoker nominated A New York State of Fright, and has a popular caption on Facebook, which we've already talked about. So, you are a working author. What do you do to grow your author chops and to keep them fresh?
I go to as many conferences as I can, and I listen to other people and find out, what they do. Is there something maybe they're doing that I'm not doing? Especially when it comes to marketing. So many times, I mean, and I actually come from a background in marketing and publicity, but so many times I feel like, oh God, if only I could afford a publicist. And we all know they start at about $13,000, or so, to hire one, which I can't afford. And a lot of us can't. Or I feel like I need to hire a part-time assistant. And it's like, and I can't do that either. I've got to do everything myself. So I always like to hear how somebody got 30,000 people on their newsletter mailing list. Give me some tips here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
And at least and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I like to wake up in the middle of the night to do my writing, because the phone won't ring. If it rings, I know it's an family emergency. But I don't have to make any phone calls for doctor's appointments or dealing with medical insurance or any of that horrible stuff, you don't
Right,
want to have to
right,
deal with.
right,
And
right.
I end up going into and also New York City is noisy. I hear deliveries on the street, I hear jackhammers, I hear ambulances, you name it. And I don't generally hear that in the middle of the night. So I have total pretty much silence, uninterrupted, time to be creative. And then when 9 o'clock rolls around, I switch to left brain mode. So that's when I do the social media and I check the emails and check my calendar and see who I need to contact or send an email or, pick up my prescription at the pharmacy, all that stuff.
You mentioned that one of the things you do to keep things fresh is attend conferences, and I know Left Coast Crime is coming soon, and I understand you're going to be there. What are your favorite writers' conferences? Because it's hard to know, especially if you are just a newbie writer. If you're just getting started, they all look fabulous. They all look like so much fun, and of course, you don't know anybody. So, what would you say are the best conference, your favorite, and what would be the best conferences for someone who is just starting out?
I would say Left Coast Crime. It's a little less intimidating than BoucherCon, and I would say BoucherCon would come in second place because it's smaller.
Mm.
So I think but it's still large. It's not so small that all you're running into are like your local Sisters in Crime chapter.
Right, right.
It's big enough where you're going to get an international audience, and but it's small enough where people are much more approachable. I've noticed, and you don't feel as overwhelmed or possibly intimidated. Which can happen, I would say, at a BoucherCon, especially your first one, and you don't know anybody there, and you also don't. The one thing, though, certainly for people who haven't been to conventions, is each convention runs differently. So the first time you attend any convention, it's always a little awkward because you don't exactly know how the administrative staff usually puts everything together. So, once you do it, at least go once, you figure, oh, okay, that's what author speed dating is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what a new author's breakfast is all about. So, and then you feel a little more comfortable. And hopefully, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And I have forced myself over the years become more of an extrovert. And I go out of my way, if possible, so if somebody doesn't have like a huge entourage around them and they're totally unapproachable, I try to go out of my way to have conversations with people, and you'd be surprised how many New York Times bestselling authors, especially at a smaller convention, are very approachable. So,
Well, that sounds really great, and I like Left Coast Crime because it's more craft oriented. I think that Bachacom really is more for the fans. Not that you don't pick up some writing tips and information there too, but I think Left Coast Crime is more focused on giving writers information that they can then take home and use. Where Bachacom, because it is so huge and you're exposed to so many people, um, I think that I come off Bachacom feeling exhausted, but really jazzed and excited about being a writer, you
mm,
know, you know, so anyway, so alrighty. So and I wanted to ask, oh, you also mentioned Malice Domestic and Killer Nashville.
yes,
How
um,
how do they compare?
they're
Because I
all
didn't know anything about those conferences for a lot of years.
yeah. You know what? I went to my first Killer Nashville last year, and I had entered one of their. I had heard great things about it from a lot of people, and I actually had signed up for it. I think the first time in 2020, or 2021, whatever it was. It was in the middle of the pandemic, and it was the year. Actually, I think it was 2021. It was the year that VoucherCon was supposed to be in New Orleans, and it canceled 3 weeks before. And I had planned originally to stop and go to Killer Nashville for the first time. And then from Nashville, I was going to take a flight to New Orleans. But when New Orleans got canceled and Nashville, unfortunately, was a high non-vax state, there were a lot of anti-vaxxers there, and there were no demands at the time that you had to be vaxxed to go to the conferences. I was a little leery about it, so I canceled out that year. But I went last year because I was a Claymore Award finalist, and for a unpublished, it was the unpublished version of the Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles.
Really?
And I did not win, first prize in the category, but they had a humorous mystery category, which I was really excited about because that's what I write. And it came in as a finalist, and I figured, let's check it out. Let's go to Killer Nashville. I've been wanting to do it, and I ended up going, and I was normally the Claymore Awards are for unpublished manuscripts, but when I submitted the manuscript, I didn't have a contract yet. So the head of Killer Nashville said, "No, you are still eligible for the Claymore." So I said, "Great," because at about 2 months after I submitted it, I got the contract.
Oh,
So
yay.
he said I was still eligible, and I was excited about it. So, but I'm going to
Yeah.
go again this year because it's in Nashville, and so is BoucherCon. So I'm just going to, stick around and probably rent a car in between and maybe drive off to Graceland or something.
Yeah, I had originally hoped to be able to do both because how often do you get two mega conferences that close together? By the time you spend the money to get to one, you might as well stick around and do the second,
Oh yeah,
and hit them both.
yeah, no, absolutely.
So and was it Left Coast Crime that the conference had actually started and then got shut down for the
Yes,
pandemic?
that was my very first Left Coast Crime. That was in San Diego, 8.5 hours into it.
Oh,
And the guest of honor didn't even get to do his, the first, they didn't even get to interview the guest of honor. I think
oh.
we were all getting ready for it, and I think it was Matt Coyle was the guest of honor, and uh, shut down. We all had to get on our phones and scramble for the next flight out of town. I was, worried that I was going to be stranded, and they were going to shut all flights down.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
they
But
did for European travel for sure. I was worried about domestic, so I wanted to get out of town as soon as as soon as possible.
See, those are the stories that end up in somebody's book, you know?
Well, the Boucher Con that got canceled in New Orleans that year because of COVID, all the guest of honors, canceled out at the last minute. That one, they had the hurricane that weekend. So it's probably a very good idea
That they canceled. Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have one more question before I ask you to put on your Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles hat. Um, Another author question.
Sure.
What literary fiction book should every aspiring writer have on their shelf?
That was a tough one. I actually had to think about it because I grew up in a household with like 4 books. My parents did not read. And
Wow.
believe it or not, one of the books that they had was Dr. Spock. Yeah, How to Raise Children, not Mr. Spock, Dr. Spock. And another one, which is really funny considering the fact that I've got this caption contest going, it was a picture book with funny photos of babies. And somebody put thought balloons next to all the funny photos. So like if the kid could talk, or if you could, vocalize the thoughts that was going on with the kid, but somebody was basically writing captions to the photographs. And I used to love this thing. I used to read it all the time. There was nothing in the house to read. So, but the good news is my parents, there was a public library within walking distance, and I had carte blanche to take out anything I wanted, and also anything from the school library. But outside of maybe a few Dr. Seuss books that my parents bought me because I insisted they buy them, or somebody gave them to me for gifts. I had no books in the house growing up. But when I thought about the question, I said to myself, okay, first I'm thinking, okay, Great Gatsby. Sure, that's fine. But I was going to say everybody says that one. The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and I'm probably pronouncing the Chinese wrong, but it is really a good philosophical book. It's nonfiction, obviously, it's not fiction. But when it comes to fiction, I would say either Alice in Wonderland or the Mark Twain book, Connecticut Yankee,
Connecticut Yankee.
King Arthur's Court.
Mm-hmm.
That actually is a better time travel book than H.G. Wells' Time Machine, as far as I'm concerned. It is
So
just
do you
classic.
see these books as books that will inspire new authors, young authors, give you ideas of what's possible, or just an example of time travel well done, or why these books?
Well, the Mark Twain is, I think it's just, Mark Twain himself is just such classic Americana. In fact, I don't know whether or not people overseas really read his stuff. I've never really asked, actually. I just remember having to read some of his stuff for required reading as a kid in school. But, his stuff is so classic. Fitzgerald's Great Gatsby is so classic of the 20s, and the lifestyle of freewheeling lifestyle of people in the New York area. That's just so, jazz age for me. As I said, the Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court is just that classic 19th century, American humor. I think it was, well, he was definitely born in the 19th century. I can't remember if that one was actually written before or after the turn of the century. It might have been written after. And the other one, The Art of War, was written like in the 1600s, but it is so applicable, as far as strategy is concerned. So I'd have to reread it. it's been years since I read it, but I remember when I was reading a lot of martial arts books and Japanese books, I definitely, added that one in.
Yeah, you mentioned at our rehearsal, you I'm trying to remember, is it judo or karate that you have
No,
a
no, it's not. I have a black belt in ninjutsu, and it's a very similar. I have studied with some of the same people that Tori Eldridge has, who wrote the Ninja Daughter series, has trained with.
ah,
So
so so the fighting would definitely fascinate you that in the
definitely, yeah,
stories.
yeah.
Okay, so you're best known for your cult classic Time Travel Professor series. Now, I wasn't familiar with this series, so for others like me, here's a quick little overview. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is obsessed with a legendary red book. Its peculiar stories have come to life, and rumors claim that it has rewritten its own endings. Convinced that possessing this book will help him write his ever popular Sherlock Holmes stories, he takes on an unlikely partner, John Patrick Scott, known to most as a concert pianist, but a paranormal investigator and a time traveler professor to a select few. Like Holmes and Watson trying to solve a mystery, together they explore lost words, and their friendship is tested to the limits when they go back in time to find the book. Both discover that karmic ties and unconscionable crimes have followed them like ghosts from the past, wreaking havoc on the present and possibly the future. The Time Traveler Professor, Book One, Silent Meridian, reveals the alternate histories of Conan Doyle, H.G. Wells, Houdini, Jung, and other luminaries in the secret diaries of John Patrick Scott in an X file for the 19th century. Well, okay, now that's another series that we have to delve into at another time, but I understand there's a sequel.
Oh
Can,
yes, there's two. There's three books in the series.
can you tell us a little bit about them?
The second book, it follows a timeline, and the second book starts in August of 1914 when World War One breaks out, and our protagonist winds up on the Western Front. So, and I actually had to go over to the Western Front. I had written some chapters and had to rewrite them because I had never been to some of these areas of France and Belgium. And I ended up with a tour guide who had a master's degree in European history and knew the area. He grew up there. So
Wow,
it
wow.
was an interesting situation, but it's basically the second book. If I gave you a log line, would be Slaughterhouse Five meets Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell on the Western Front.
Wow, wow.
And
And
the
the third
third
one?
is like a mashup between the Lost World and the island of Dr. Moreau.
Wow. So that's another for my to be read pile. Okay.
Yes.
So Conan Doyle appears frequently in your own canon. What is it about him that fascinates you?
He is a very contradictory person. Well, first of all, he was the highest paid writer of his time. And he had a conundrum that Basil Rathbone experienced in Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles is he got typecast. And everybody wanted Sherlock Holmes. He got tired of writing the Sherlock Holmes short stories, and he had what four novels, and the rest short stories. But he killed off Sherlock Holmes at one point and had to bring him back. He had a family to support and a mother to support, and he couldn't refuse the money. So, but what was so interesting was that this was a guy who wrote about a detective and came up with forensics that people hadn't really heard of, and he just kind of stuck him in his, literary things. I mean, he was a doctor an eye doctor by profession, but some of the stuff he just kind of came up with creatively, and people put it into practice later on. But he was very interested. He was a member of the Society of Psychical Research, London chapter. He was also a member, I love saying, talking about this one, of a society called the Ghost Club.
The Ghost?
The Ghost Club. But a lot of scientists and very high up political figures belonged to these societies. And they wanted to prove that ghosts exist, that they wanted to prove scientific proof of paranormal phenomenon, life after death. And eventually he became very involved with spiritualism and seances. And that's where and I get into it in the my fictional series, is he started a very tight friendship originally with Harry Houdini, who had a phenomenal collection of stuff. But unfortunately, who could fool the world's greatest magicians? There were a lot of charlatans, and people were faking seances for a lot of money. And Houdini spotted all of them. In fact, he hired spies sometimes to attend these places and expose the fraud. But unfortunately, he had a major falling out with Conan Doyle, because they had Houdini was very close with his mother, and he wanted to believe he could contact her through seances in a life after death type of conversation. And Lady Doyle, Conan Doyle's second wife, claimed that she was a very skillful medium, and they had a seance in Atlantic City, and she claimed that she contacted his mother, and he said, no, this was not my mother. And they had a major falling out, serious falling out about it. But one of the reasons why Conan Doyle wanted to kill off Sherlock Holmes is he wanted to write stuff on spiritualism and paranormal phenomenon, things along those lines. And also he did do some historical, both nonfiction and some historical fiction. And he was interested in expanding in those areas. And he even had a small press publishing company in London to do metaphysical handbooks for a while. And it eventually folded. But but Sherlock Holmes was like the complete opposite of that. So that's why I found him, when I learned more and more about Conan Doyle, he was just such a man of opposites. It was just amazing.
So he was trapped by his own notoriety.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that would have to be bittersweet for an author to have a character that you created that was very popular, that was much beloved, and then you just kind of like, okay, I'm tired of this. I want to do something else. And people are going, nope, that's what we want. That's the character we want you to write. And so you got bills to pay. So there you are. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Basil Rathbone was the same way. I mean, he did 14 movies. His first two were from Fox Studios, and the other 12 were with Universal Studios. And he did 14 of Sherlock Holmes, and then he did radio shows for years. But he wanted to go back to Broadway. He was a Shakespearean actor. He loved the theater, and he didn't make the kind of money that he made in movies, but he was tired of doing Sherlock Holmes. He wanted to expand his repertoire and was very frustrated, very similar to what Doyle went through.
So it's almost like there's a Sherlock Holmes curse.
Yes, almost.
If you write him or you portray him, you get sucked in. What's that line from The Godfather? Just when I think I'm getting out, they draw me back in. Wow. Okay. Well, okay. So now we know about Sherlock Holmes and Conan Doyle. And so let's talk a little bit about Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, which was a fun book. I've got to say, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Joanne Love of Joanne's Music says of Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, Bringing back the golden era of Hollywood is what you'll find in this entertaining new series. To fill in a few blanks for people too young to remember that golden era of Hollywood, or those who don't have Turner Classic Movies on their cable service, The Thin Man, a novel by Dashiell Hammett, who I didn't know was a former Pinkerton detective. I didn't realize that till I read the your book, was published in 1934. Hammett's portrayal of a sophisticated New York cafe society during Prohibition and his witty protagonist, Nick and Nora Charles, made this the most popular of his works, if not the most successful critically. Nick and Nora are a married couple who solve murder mysteries while exchanging sharp and smart repartee. The tremendous popularity of the characters made them a media archetype, as the bantering, romantically involved detective duo has become a well used trope in literature, stage, screen, and television ever since. And then Hammett's fictional detective creation, The Maltese Falcon from 1930, generally considered to be his finest work, introduced Sam Spade, the quintessential hard-boiled private detective and protagonist of The Maltese Falcon, and several short stories. So in Hounds of the Hollywood Baskerville, Babs Norman and Guy Brandt bring whispers of Nick and Nora to the story. So any chance of doing the same thing for the Maltese Falcon and for Spade and Archer?
Well, that's what you guess what my sequel is all about. The sequel is Bye Bye Blackbird. And apparently, of all the dogs that are celebrity dogs that are getting stolen in the first book, and by the way, no dogs die, okay, in the book, but all the dogs are found returned. And one of the dogs that was stolen was a Newfoundland named Cappy that happened to be owned by Humphrey Bogart. And Humphrey has a conversation. They have a big, big party celebration of when all the dogs are returned at the very end. And at one point, Bogart is playing with Pard, who is actually the dog that is in High Sierra. And he's a bad luck charm, apparently. He's kind of a scruffy kind of terrier mix, kind of looks like Toto, from the Wizard of Oz. And he's playing with Pard. And Guy Brandt comes over to him, and they start having a conversation. And Guy's a little jealous of him because he's so far, Humphrey Bogart's been playing mostly a bad guy, actually, but a tough guy role, but the bad guy. And they have a conversation, and both Guy and Babs are former actors whose careers that went through a lot of frustration. They weren't getting where they wanted them to. And he kind of he still doesn't want to completely give it up. Like if he gets the good audition, yeah, sure, I'll take the role, even though I've got a private detective business. And he likes to think of himself as kind of a tough guy, but he'll never come off that way. A little too dapper, with his dressing, he's kind of a small guy, maybe about 5'7", barely 130 pounds. He gets the fall guy, the patsy, the soda jerk, the filling station attendant type of roles. And he's a little jealous of Bogey with the kind of roles he's been getting. And Bogey says, oh, well, I got the script and I'm going to be a tough guy, but a good guy at the same time. And they don't really discuss what the project is, but Guy gives him a business card. He said, well, we're really not pet detectives. This is not really the type of work we normally do, but you never know. I mean, celebrities, somebody might try to blackmail you, somebody, burglary, you never know. So they exchange cards, and he takes him up on the offer, because apparently in Bye Bye Blackbird, which is the name of the sequel, the cast of the Maltese Falcon is being threatened with some very bizarre crimes. So, and some people die. but not the cast, obviously, but close. There's some pretty bad threats going on. So I won't give away that spoiler, but it will involve the cast and the director. John Huston's in it too, of Maltese Falcon.
No, that was one of the things I found so much fun about Hounds of the Hollywood Baskerville was that um I am old enough to, and I enjoy Turner Classic Movies enough to know about the Thin Man, Nick and Nora, the Maltese Falcon, and all those. But I think that readers would still enjoy this and the way you have your characters interact, even if they weren't familiar with this time in the 1940s. But you have an interesting story of how Babs Norman was born. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The origin of Babs Norman. Yeah, she was based on my best friend. And I knew a woman. Unfortunately, she would have been 101 this year if she was still around. But she was an actress, a very frustrated actress and model in the 40s. Oh yeah, there's the photo. He put the photo. That is my friend, and what she looked like back then. But she looks a little bit like Natalie Portman, I would say, of anybody I know, who she'd resemble now. And she very frustrated career, and she ended up doing other things besides the acting. She kind of gave it up. She was still singing. She was doing some nightclub singing for a while. But my friend would tell me all sorts of stories. And I ended up putting a lot of stuff on recording. I have all her photographs. And we legally, when she got diagnosed with a brain tumor at the age of 93, and they weren't going to be able to, do anything, you couldn't even do a biopsy at that point, at that age, to find out how big it was. We legally set it up so I would get the rights to her life story. And I was worried because I'm thinking, oh, she's not famous. And it's the memoirs are like the hardest thing to sell. I know somebody who climbed Mount Everest, and he had to end up, he got an agent and he wrote a memoir, and a year and a half, she shopped it around and couldn't even sell it. He ended up self-publishing it. Everest, I mean, how many people have climbed, how many people do you know have climbed Mount Everest?
None.
And I told her, I said, this is going to be really tough. And then one day the light bulb went off. And I said, I figured out how to market it. And she said, how? And I said, we're going to fictionalize you. We're going to make you a former actress turned piano, which is very unusual for a woman in the 1940s. And she said, oh, I like that. So why are you coming up with that? And I said, well, I'll tell you. Every time you go to the public library, you check out a mystery. What do you watch on television? Because she was mobility impaired. She had a walker. She wasn't getting around all that well. And she would check out, on television, at the library, she checked out mysteries. On television, she always watched Murder, She Wrote, Turner Classic Movies, NCIS. I don't know why she loved it. She loved NCIS. Law and Order. I would see Law and Order marathons on all the time. Or she watched Nat Geo Wild or Animal Planet. Big animal lover. And I would hear stories for years about all the animals she rescued and everything. And I said, you are going to be an animal loving PI from the 40s.
Wow.
And
wow.
I said, I love it. Go for it. And I only wish that I could have gotten this book out while she was still alive. She actually did go to my very first book launch for Silent Meridian. And she read the book. She loved it. And I told her, I said, I'm still trying to figure out what to do with your story, but it will happen. And so she is Babs Norman. And
Wow.
I basically dedicated this series to her.
Well, it is really, having read the book now, it is really great to have a picture of the real Babs Norman, what
Yeah.
she looked like. But since she's no longer with us, if this book was ever made into a movie, who would you want to have play her?
Well, the real Babs Norman does look a lot like Natalie Portman, but her character is like barely 30, and Natalie's 42 now. So I would say Emma Stone could do it.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think for Guy Brandt, I think somebody like Zac Efron,
Mm,
and he would be the right age too. I think
right.
the two of them could definitely pull it off.
Well, I'd pay to see that movie. I really would, and I would thoroughly enjoy it. That would be a lot of fun. You guys have got to read the book so that you can enjoy all of this as well. But Elizabeth, you are known for your attention to detail and meticulous research. What tools did you use to create a very authentic Hollywood of that era? Because you did such a good job with that.
A lot of Turner classic movies. I mean, to the point where I could almost recite the dialogue. But I also, in fact, it's funny, I won a trivia contest. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I think Lori Raider Day was the one who was holding the contest. And it was my very first Malice Domestic. And they were holding up objects, and you kind of had to guess, the mystery or whatever that the object was
Oh,
related to.
yeah.
And all of a sudden, she held up this stuffed schnauzer. And I was the only one in the room who figured it out because I had read the original Thin Man and not just watched the movies. Because the movies have a wired hair fox terrier to play Asta. And in the book, he's a schnauzer. And I actually have, I think it's chapter 3, chapter 4. Basil Rathbone comes with the two detectives, and they interview Dashiell Hammett as one of the potential suspects, okay, with the disappearance of Asta. And he tells them not only where he came up with the name, but also the fact that he was a schnauzer.
Schnauzer.
And apparently, none of the trainers in Hollywood could find a trained schnauzer to do all the tricks. So they ended up replacing him with a different dog.
That I remember that in the book where he said, I know that there are some writers who will kill if you deviate from their story too much, but trust me, I would not kidnap the dog because
Right.
he's not a schnauzer. This was really, it's one of the more funny scenes in the book with, and again, if you only know the Thin Man from the movies, you wouldn't know.
Right.
You wouldn't know that. And that's one of those lovely things where you, going back to your source document, so to speak, where you find out the where Hollywood changed for whatever reason. They changed the direction of something in the story, a plot or a plot twist or a dog for that matter.
Yeah. Now I also had to read a lot of biographies. And in one of the biographies that I read of Hammett, he was also talking, and I put it right in the book, is where he came up with the name Asta. And that, if you remember that part of the chapter, it's hilarious. He was playing a joke on a guy, his name is, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, Sid Perlman, but it's or Perlman, something like that. It's like Perleman. But he was a very popular playwright in New York. And apparently he did a practical joke on the guy, and he and his Hammett and Perlman's wife hired a stripper for prostitute or something to show up and try to seduce the guy. And apparently the dog that his wife had at the time was named Asta. And that's where he came up with the name, because he always thought about this crazy practical joke, apparently, that he played on a very good friend of his. That's how the name, for both the book and eventually the film came up.
And there's all kinds of little behind the scenes tidbits like this in the book that you'll get as you read them. But you paint such a rich cast of character in Hollywood Hounds. So as a writer, how do you get inside someone else's head to be able to do that?
Well, I tend to be strong on dialogue. And in fact, if anything, my weak point is setting, or the sensation, like the smell, the feel, and all that stuff. I tend to be either visually oriented, because that's my background, was film studies, cinematography, still photography, or dialogue heavy. So because I come from kind of a screenplay background. So
that helps as you're trying to create the characters.
We don't get into the details, but you got to force yourself as a writer to be able to get that.
And we were talking about Asta. Is it true that Asta was the highest paid animal actor of the day? Even more money than Lassie further on down, because I know that was much further, but for the 1940s.
For 1940, yes, he was making more money than any celebrity dog.
Wow.
Yeah. Lassie, now Rin Tin Tin came before.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Those came in the 30s, but the first Lassie, I think Lassie Come Home, and I made a hint towards it, but I couldn't really say it because I think it took place in 1941 or 42. And this takes place actually as Nigel Bruce in it, who played Watson, for Basil Rathbone's Sherlock Holmes. But that I don't think came out to 41 or 42. But Asta was still the highest paid celebrity, movie dog.
Wow. Well, talk about, getting money, having your job go to the dogs, but and they made the comment in the book that the dogs were actually making more money than the trainers that trained the dogs.
Yeah. Now, Asta's owner was a prop master. And I think, of course, back then, you have to realize that, and this was always a challenge in writing it, is the dollar was about 20 times what we think, as far as the monetary exchange for the time. And the prop master was making about $60 a week, and Asta was making $250. And he started making more than that. And at that point, the guy said, you know what? I think I better quit my job and put the dog to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To be able to get it from the dogs since they were making more money. So, okay. I have monopolized you, and folks, I apologize, but there were just so many questions I wanted to ask. So are there any questions out there, Rick, in the chat, or does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Elizabeth about Hollywood or the Golden Age or dogs or the Thin Man, Nick and Nora, the Maltese Falcon?
Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, Sherlock Holmes, Conan Doyle. I have some more questions. I'll keep going, but if you guys have any questions, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in there.
We don't have any questions yet, but please, if you have some, put them in the chat and we'll get them to Elizabeth.
I see Harriet's question. It's a spoiler. It's do I have a favorite scene or chapter in the book? Yeah, they're towards the end when they're trying to capture the bad guys. That's all I'll say. Because it is a surprise twist. It is not who you think it is. Yep. But there is a scene with the Marx Brothers. And I'll leave it at that. But that is my favorite scene of the whole, I want to say movie, because it is literally a recreation. Oh, who are the two men in the photo with the dachshunds? That's Nigel Bruce and Basil Rathbone. So
I'm gonna have to go back up,
Sherlock and
scroll
Watson.
up so I can
Yeah,
see the picture of the
they
guys with the
started
dachshund.
but yes, the movies.
They're poolside.
Yes.
Ah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
so maybe to explain that is that when I created Babs Norman, I knew she was going to be an animal lover. I needed her to have a celebrity client. So who was my first choice? Well, since I've written so much about Conan Doyle in my time travel series, I figured, well, who is the Sherlock Holmes of Hollywood in 1940? Basil Rathbone. And when I started reading his first biography, at any given time, he always had at least 5 dogs, several cats, and canaries. He loved his dogs. He talks about it all the time. So I'm thinking, let's have one of his dogs be taken, right? But that wasn't enough because, okay, Basil is famous, but nobody knows who his dog is. It's a personal dog. It's owned by a celebrity, but it's a personal dog. So let's ramp up the stakes. Let's get a celebrity dog. Who's the biggest celebrity dog in 1940? Asta.
yeah, yeah.
And it just happened to be, as I was doing research, that Thin Man was on TCM that weekend. I said, that's our dog.
It's a sign.
And then, of course, at that point, I had to rope in Nick and Nora Charles. So that's where I'm normally a serious plotter, but in this case, I kind of pants the beginning, as to kind of how it formulated. And then once I had the idea, I definitely started plotting at that point.
Mm-hmm. And Marie asked, what's the coolest place you went to research this or any other book?
Coolest place. I actually just had to cancel for my sequel. I was going to go to San Francisco. And unfortunately, I have a broken bone in my foot. So going up and down the hills of San Francisco is not the best thing for me right now. So that's why I'm going to be going straight to the Sacramento airport for the event in Sutter Creek. But the coolest place I researched for this one. Thinking about a lot of the places that I researched. Oh, okay. I have been, before they tore it down, it is now a middle school. I've been to the Ambassador Hotel. Now, I was not at the Ambassador Hotel in 1940, but I actually worked a few days on The Wedding Singer with Adam Sandler back in the 90s. And that's not the only time I've been to the Ambassador Hotel, but that is where they filmed the scene with the old lady where she does the hip hop and hip hop, So I have been in the place. Obviously, it was not set up like the old Coconut Grove, which I would have loved to have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen plenty of photos, and I actually have a book just on the Coconut Grove. But I would say that's off the top of my head, that would definitely be one of the cooler places that I've been where there's definitely a scene in the film. Now, I've been to Musso and Frank, but anybody can get into it. Musso and Frank, at least is the bar, but hard to get reservations. But the place does still exist. But that the Ambassador Hotel is no longer. So I've been there.
So it says, what are you working on now? And you're working on the sequel to
Yes.
Hounds, right? Bye Bye
Yes.
Blackbird.
And I'm already 5,000 words into it.
So you're well into it now. Yeah.
Lots of revisions still, but it is coming. It is almost together.
And
So-
you're going to be at Left Coast Crime.
Yes.
Yeah. And you're going to be in Northern California for those of us in my neck of the woods on May 7th for an event. Can you
Yes.
tell us more about that? And at the beginning of the chat, I know Rick put it in. Can you bring it back down to the end of the chat, Rick? The details about Elizabeth's May 7th event. So you tell us a little bit about it while he's bringing it down, Elizabeth.
Yes.
There it is. Thanks,
Not
Rick.
every book in the series is going to have the Sherlock Holmes influence, but I figured I know a lot of people who do love Sherlock Holmes and obviously are familiar with the Basil Rathbone films. So I reached out, and there is an organization called Baker Street West, and they had, in fact, Donna Wilbur filmed a short film, Sherlock Films, or Sherlock Holmes film there. But they had a setup that looked like Baker Street. And they would do film and theatrical productions there. It's packed up and they're in the process of moving. So the Baker Street West people, Linda Hine, I didn't realize she and her husband owned a nice used bookstore in Sutter Creek on Main Street. And when obviously the idea would have been in the setup, the Victorian, type of Sherlock house setup, Baker Street. But because it's in transition, she said, let's have it at the store. And I said, great. So she's going to interview me, and they have copies of the book, which will be available for sale, and I can sign. And also they limited copies of the time travel books too. So she's ordered a few of those, and it'll be fun.
So that'll be May 7th
Yes.
in Sutter Creek. Okay, so those of you who are nearby should go by and check it out for sure. And I have just had the best time, and I want to wrap it up by saying, if you haven't had the opportunity to read Hounds of the Hollywood Baskervilles, you really do need to check it out. It's a fun read. And for those of us who are fans of Turner Classic Movie and The Thin Man and Spade and all of that, you really it's a delightful romp and a lot of fun. And so, Elizabeth, I really want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. I wish I could see you in Seattle, but a lot of my friends across the top are going to be in Seattle for Left Coast Crime. So don't be shy. Come up and say hi to Elizabeth. And I have just had the best time. I hope you guys have too. It was just a delight to talk with you. This was so much fun. So much fun. I before I turn it back over to Karen, I just want to say don't miss Capital Crimes meeting for April. We're going to learn how to handle firearms, not any machine guns, which I wanted to find out about, but that's okay. So that'll be a lot of fun. And you've got another month to polish up that story for the anthology, because we want it to be an incredible anthology and represent all the wonderful talent that we have in the chapter. So that's all I got. And thank you all for coming in and sitting and hanging with us and listening. I hope you're all hard at work writing on your anthology short stories. And I'm just going to turn it over to Karen.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Penny. You're always so good at this. And thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I hope to see a lot of you at Left Coast Crime.
Yeah.
Oh, Dover asked if I guess it's the chapter meeting in April, if that's going to be recorded, but all of ours are recorded for members, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So yay. So you won't miss it. It'll be cool. It's good. All righty. Well, okay. Thank you guys for joining.
Can I just say one thing, Penny?
Sorry,
Yes,
Rick.
We are having after we have the speaker in April, he's going to have us out to his ranch in Sutter County for a day at the range. So that'll be part of the whole program. So
Thanks.
We're going to learn how to use the firearms in April, and then get to go out afterwards and shoot stuff up at his ranch.
right. Yeah.
Oh boy.
What could be better?
Such
Better yet,
fun.
what could go wrong?
Yeah. Not with that setup. I can't think of a thing. So, well, it is good to see everybody, and y'all have a good time at, well, not too much. Okay. Don't do anything I wouldn't enjoy at Left Coast Crime. Okay. There you go. I'll just leave it there.
Good
So,
night.
good night. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night, Elizabeth. Thank you. Boy, Rick, that was fun.
That was good. Great job.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. No, that went really well. Yeah.
Did she send you the pictures?
She sent me those after rehearsal, and I said, "Well, try to slip them in and do guess who and who's this and that," and I kind of worked out kind of neat. I thought.
Yes, that was great, and I love the picture of her friend.
Yeah.
I'm
She's
glad
gorgeous.
she
Look at
is
that.
gorgeous, just
Yeah.
gorgeous. Well, that was okay.
Yeah, you did a great job, and we'll have to commiserate not going to Left Coast Crime together. Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
I can't believe that they're leaving us, not
I
taking
know.
us along,
You
but
are
that's
on
okay.
resources.
We're the party people. How can
I know.
we miss out of it? Hey,
Listen,
so
you have a good
anyway,
one. Tell Craig I said hello. Okay.
I will. You take good care.
Okay.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
are you still bacheloring it?
No, she's back till she's leaving again tomorrow to visit her sister down and she had that surgery. So
Oh.
I got one more night with her. That's it. Then
When Craig was doing stuff at the interior, it was like that. He'd come home for one night and they'd be off again.
I
And
know.
it's like,
Yeah,
gosh, I got married for this.
have gun
Anyway.
will travel.
Exactly. Well, tell her hi,
I will.
and I'll keep her sister in my prayers. And you guys be well, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
All right. Thanks very much, Penny.
Sure.
Great job again. That was excellent.
Thanks. Bye bye.